This morning we have the privilege of the first lecture of Robert Moore for us in this conference. Robert Moore is a Jungian analyst. He is a training analyst at the C.G. Jung Institute in Chicago. He is also professor of psychology and religion at Chicago Theological Seminary. He's the editor of Carl Jung and Christian Spirituality, which is a book that you will find over here on the table. There are 6 more volumes already under contract of this series. That book is a series. And there are 6 others under contract which will examine the relationship of Carl Jung to other major religions of the world. He's the president of the Institute for World Spirituality as well, and also is the co-editor of Jung's Challenge to Contemporary Religion. Robert was a lecturer for us a few years ago, and he spoke then on the masculine archetypes in a very powerful way. At that particular time, we were into a lot of the feminine archetypes and the feminine involvement, and there were a lot of men that said we need some masculine input. And so we called upon Robert, and it was a powerful series. And I know what he has to offer for us now will also be a powerful time and experience.
Thank you, Jim. It's a pleasure for me to be here with Journey into Wholeness again. It's an honor for me to be part of the advisory board. I really believe in the work that Jim and Annette and all of you are doing. I think it's one of the most important institutionalizations of the provision of a forum for the discussion of the important relationships between Jungian thought in general and Christian spirituality in particular, as well as the widespread struggle to formulate a human spirituality which is equal to a postmodern planetary culture. And this is a enormously important thing, and it's a joy to be with all of you. Now, John Dowerly last evening was emphasizing a lot of the contribution, as he views it, of Jung's theological ideas. I'm going to emphasize this morning, especially, and in my second lecture, the psychology itself, the uniqueness of Jung's psychology, and why it is we turn to Jung's psychology particularly and not just others. And so I want to say a little bit about the uniqueness of Jung's psychology. For those of you who are not schooled in comparative psychology or comparative psychoanalytic theory, I'm privileged to have the responsibility of teaching comparative psychoanalytic theory at the doctoral level. As some of you know, before I was a Jungian psychoanalyst, I was an Adlerian psychoanalyst. And before I wrote anything on Jung, my first book was a Freudian book. So I have sort of recapitulated the history of the psychoanalytic movement in my long journey. My niece once asked me why I went to school so long, and I said, honey, some of us just take longer than others to get around to the right things. But let me just say just a word. It seems to me that the genius of Jung's psychology, which we who are theorists and practitioners of his psychology have to constantly keep in mind, is his understanding that the unconscious is structured. Now this is an incredibly important idea, and let me just say why. Because it's the only school of psychoanalytic theory that views the unconscious as a place that can actually be mapped. It is related to Chomsky's model of linguistics, that there are in fact deep structures in the human psyche, in the unconscious, that the unconscious is not just like the Freudians used to teach. a cauldron of energy that is basically chaotic. The unconscious is full of deep structures which influence and in too many ways determine the life of the ego. And so if you'll think a moment about that, if Jung is right, as I believe he is, it means that serious, careful study can help open up a geography of the inner world so that you will not be totally lost when you start exploring the psyche and psychic life. That is, there are predictable things that you can recognize in the inner world. And this is not something which is just somebody's conceptual idea. These are things which Jung viewed as being something we find empirically through research. This is a phenomenological investigation. These are not somebody's strange mystical religious ideas. These are structures in the psyche which can be seen whether you're a Jungian or not, if you can look carefully enough. And so what I want to emphasize this morning is Jung's psychology as a scientific, empirical psychology of the deep structures of the human unconscious. The way to talk about this is the archetypes are not Jungian. They are human. Jung simply was a pioneer in beginning to map them. And there have been others that have done this. Now, I'll get into showing you why that is important in the context of our conference and our topic. The first thing, I'd like to do a number of things. I've got too much here to do. And we'll see how far we get this morning, and I'll pick up, if I don't get as far as I want to get, I'll pick up in the second presentation tomorrow. But here's the way I want to proceed. First, I want to give you a quick geography of the different spaces in the unconscious and the objective psyche, particularly located in what we call the archetypal self, or the conjunctio. Then I want to show you where I, in terms of my research, locate the psychology of Satan. There is a particular location in the archetypal structures in the psyche where you can see the human preoccupation with evil. And then I will move into elaborating that in terms of what has been called the combat myth. Because the struggle between good and evil has always in human culture been talked about in terms of the combat myth. And I want to show you the salient aspects of the combat myth. And then I want to show you some different psychoanalytic perspectives on what may be going on in this combat myth. What is this that is being combated? In other words, we need this morning to reflect upon the psychological understanding of what we would call evil. And we throw around the word evil a lot. And we tend to get too much into these meta discussions about the privatio boni and all these things. But I'm a clinician primarily, and not a meta theoretician primarily. And so I want to show you today and tomorrow the concrete, clinical, experiential things in psychopathology that you can recognize as being manifestations of the psychology of evil. Now, during the course of our discussions, we will have an opportunity for you to think and do your spiritual theology, because you're all going to have to do your own theology of this stuff, because it admits of different interpretations. And so one of the last things I'll try to get to today is showing you what Paul Ricoeur, the great philosopher, would call the conflict of interpretations on this. There are many ways to draw conclusions about the way in which evil is structured psychologically and the meaning of that theologically. So we'll see. I'm just going to present to you some of the options. I will tell you what seems to make more sense to me, but I can't play Vatican here for you. So you're going to have to do your own theology and struggle with that this week. So if you're ready, feel free to raise your hand during my presentation. I'm going to go awfully fast. The material this morning is about 8 hours of material. I'm gonna hit the ground running. I've got to be able to see it too.